At a national charity gala, my cousin smirked. Dreamers dream, builders build. We know where she stands. I smiled, waited 2 full generations, and quietly plotted their collapse. When it happened, it was complete. Properties seized, records shredded, family legacies struck from every legal archive. Meanwhile, a new scholarship for visionary leadership was created in my name, funded by the ruins of what used to be their empire. When I was 23, I stood in heels that hurt, wearing a second-hand designer dress I'd borrowed from a friend who worked in PR, and watched my cousin humiliate me in front of 700 people at the National Children's Literacy Foundation Gala in San Francisco. It was supposed to be the biggest night of my life. Instead, he made sure I would never forget it. Let me explain something first. I didn't grow up poor, but I didn't grow up them. My dad taught high school algebra in Santa Rosa. My mom was a library assistant. We had a small house, a beat-up Corolla, and a lot of love. We didn't take vacations. We had tuna casserole and homemade birthday cakes. My aunt, on the other hand, married into the Brennerman family. The Brennermans were the kind of rich that didn't show off because they didn't need to. They owned the land under other rich people's houses. They owned silence in the form of NDAs. They had buildings and parks and committees named after them all over California. Every holiday, my parents would drag me to some stiff dinner where I'd be stuck listening to Connor talk about venture capital, IPOs, and legacy. He was only 2 years older than me, but acted like I was a charity case they were forced to entertain. He got off on being better. I ignored it for years. My dad would say, "Don't measure yourself against that." My mom would remind me, "We raised you with values." But that night, the gala, that was different. I'd worked hard. I got my MBA. I started a nonprofit focused on online education for underfunded rural school systems. We'd just gotten our first grant. Nothing huge, $125,000, but it was proof that the idea had legs. I was invited to speak at the gala about the future of digital education. It wasn't because of my last name. It was because I'd earned it. But of course, the Brennermans were major donors, so Connor got a speaking slot too. He wasn't even supposed to introduce me. But at the last second, he stepped up to the mic and the MC didn't stop him. He held up his glass, flashed that arrogant grin he always wore, and said, "Dreamers dream, builders build. We know where she stands." And he nodded at me. People laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Enough that my stomach twisted. Enough that I wanted to vanish. I gave my speech anyway. I didn't stumble. I kept my smile. I walked off that stage to polite applause. But inside, something snapped. Afterward, I stood outside in the cold near the valet stand while he laughed with some investor I once begged for a meeting. And I decided right then and there I would ruin him. Not just him. All of them. But I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't cry. I would wait. I would build. And when the moment was right, I would strike so hard their last name would mean nothing. I didn't get revenge by becoming a social media star or public CEO. I did it by becoming invisible. Powerful but invisible. After the gala, I went heads down. I stopped trying to prove myself to anyone. I doubled down on the nonprofit, restructured it into a B Corp, brought on 2 brilliant co-founders, and pivoted to EdTech. We started building digital infrastructure for small school districts. I got federal grants, then state grants, then licensing deals. At 29, I sold our first tool for $1.2 million and didn't spend a single cent of it. I put it all into a holding company. By 35, I own 3 software patents, 2 consulting firms, and 5 LLCs, none with my name on them. While the Brennermans were in the headlines for their environmental lobbying and real estate ventures, I was buying tiny pieces of the systems they relied on. Legal back-office firms, small tech providers, even the data migration vendor that handled digitization of property records in 4 counties they operated in. Everything was strategic, quiet, legal. During that time, I watched them like a hawk. I knew their businesses better than they did. I created fake personas and joined their webinars, their fundraisers, their legacy Zoom events. I hired private investigators to legally obtain everything I could about their trusts, holdings, silent partners, and debts. I learned that Connor's son was overleveraged, that their Arizona water rights portfolio was hanging by a thread. that one of their most secure buildings had structural issues they didn't report. I found out their estate attorney, the one who handled 90% of their paperwork, had a gambling problem and needed a quiet exit. I bought the firm that bought out his shares. Every year I got closer, quietly pulling levers, moving pieces, shaping the ground underneath them while they looked the other way. I waited until Connor was in his early 60s. He wasn't as sharp anymore. His son had taken over most of the business. They had a huge development deal lined up in Tempe, Arizona. A complex deal involving land swaps, permits, and silent investors. And that's when I moved. A single quiet lien was filed on a parcel of land that had once been incorrectly labeled during digitization, a mistake I had arranged 14 years earlier. That lien triggered a title dispute. The dispute triggered an insurance freeze. The freeze triggered a funding pullout. Suddenly the $22 million deal collapsed overnight. That would have been enough for most people. But not for me, because now I had them exposed, and I was just getting started. After the Tempe deal collapsed, the Brennermans scrambled. They called emergency meetings. They pulled their lawyers in. But the thing is, I had already bought out their lawyer's parent firm a year earlier through a shell company. Their emails were being archived on a server I had direct access to. Connor's son, Trent, tried to blame a junior partner. Then he blamed the city. Then he blamed the title company. No one was buying it. Their investors got nervous. One of them leaked an internal memo about significant risk exposure. That memo ended up on a regional finance blog. It got picked up by a local news outlet in Scottsdale. Within a week, the Brennermans had 3 deals frozen and a 4th one canceled. They still had money, but their reputation? That was bleeding out fast. And I wasn't done. I used to think their empire was held together by wealth. I was wrong. It was held together by control. So I found the weak points. Trent's wife Courtney was bored, bitter, and quietly angry. I had someone pose as a recruiter and offer her a consulting role at a rival firm. She took it. Through her, I learned about infighting over the family trust. Turns out Trent had made a series of bad loans to a friend in Napa who'd used the money to buy stolen wine, yes, wine. Over $300,000 worth of it. The investment went nowhere. He covered it up. I made sure those records found their way into a financial audit tip line used by the Department of Corporations. Courtney's emails were full of anger. She wanted out. She wanted her kids protected. She wanted control of her shares. So I gave her an anonymous lawyer referral. A bulldog from Fresno who specialized in hostile trust takeovers. By the time Connor found out what was happening, his own daughter-in-law had turned on him. They tried to settle it quietly, but I leaked parts of the court filing to a podcast that covered corporate greed. Suddenly the Brennermans weren't just losing money. They were becoming a joke. They still had their legacy. Buildings, parks, endowments. I took those next. Remember how I said I invested in city digitization systems? 4 years I helped modernize public records across Northern California. That gave me backdoor access to update metadata, archival descriptions, even nomination statuses for landmark properties. One by one, historical sites tied to the Brennerman name were flagged for re-review. At the same time, I pushed anonymous complaints through local historic preservation boards, calling out zoning violations, undocumented alterations, and conflicts of interest. It worked better than I expected. Their flagship building in Palo Alto, stripped of its commemorative plaque after an error, was found in the donation history. The Brennerman Wing at a private museum in San Jose, quietly renamed after a compliance review. Even their scholarship at Stanford, the Brennerman Fellowship for Civic Leadership, was frozen due to concerns over missing endowment disclosures. Who raised the concerns? I did. Using one of 5 separate nonprofits I had seeded over the last 2 decades. Each one with clean books. Each one with purpose. Each one with reach. Trent went public. He called a press conference. Tried to frame it all as a witch hunt by tech rivals. He claimed someone was targeting their family with lies and planted evidence. He looked tired. Desperate. A shell of the smug kid I used to watch order waiters around at holiday parties. But his press conference backfired. A city reporter asked him directly if his wife had filed to dissolve the trust. He stammered. said it was family business. The next day, his wife filed for divorce. Full custody. Emergency financial freeze. It made the front page of the Sacramento Times. That was the moment I knew they were done. But I still had one more move. While the Brennermans were busy fighting lawsuits, covering debts, and dealing with a brutal divorce, I started phase 4. This was the personal part. Everything up to now had been strategic, business, legal, financial. But this next move, this was for me. It started with a funeral. Connor's younger brother, Alan, died from a stroke. He was the quiet one, the only member of that family who had ever been kind to me. I went to the funeral, sat in the back, wore black, kept my mouth shut. But while everyone else was there sobbing about legacy and family honor, I was having coffee with the local records clerk outside the county archive in Napa. Alan's estate included several properties that had been quietly passed down, vineyard land, some of it valuable. In his will, he left portions of it to a family trust with conditions. One of those conditions, if the trusts were found to be in breach or under legal dispute, ownership would revert to an alternate party named in a sealed codicil. Guess who that party was? Me. Alan had named me 20 years ago, after I helped him recover documents when a fire damaged part of their family's storage unit. He never told anyone. I didn't even remember doing it until my legal team unearthed it. So I triggered the codicil, and the land transferred. Connor's daughter Rachel tried to block the transfer. She hired a new team of attorneys, filed a motion to contest the will, claimed undue influence. But my documents were airtight. Signed. Notarized. Witnessed by someone still alive. By the time she filed her appeal, the land had already been subdivided, transferred, and sold. The money, I used it to launch the Visionary Leadership Fund, a new national scholarship aimed at students from families who had no legacy, no trust fund, no safety net. I created it in my name. I made sure the website listed its funding origin as a repurposed estate donation formerly tied to inactive trusts. I paid SEO experts to ensure that when someone Googled Brennerman Family Fund, my scholarship came up first. After that, everything got real quiet. Trent moved to Oregon, started a consulting firm that went nowhere. Last I checked, he was 3 years behind on taxes and living in a house leased under his girlfriend's name. Rachel stayed in California trying to rebuild her network, but people distanced themselves. Too much drama. Too many questions. The family home in Atherton got foreclosed on. It was auctioned quietly. I didn't buy it, that would have been too obvious, but I made sure a trust won control through a third-party foundation ended up owning the land it sits on. They rent now. In the same neighborhood they used to own half of. Their name? It's gone from the headlines, the buildings, the brochures, the records. If you search them now, all you get are old court cases and broken links. But if you search me, you get results. I thought I'd be done after the scholarship. I thought silence would be enough. But then I got a letter. It was handwritten. No return address. Just a plain envelope that showed up at my office in Oakland. Inside was a card. No signature. Just a message in jagged cursive. You destroyed our name. Hope it was worth it. I stared at it for a long time. Because the truth is I wasn't sure. By then I had built something real. A national program, a foundation, nearly $40 million in scholarship funds distributed. I sat on 3 nonprofit boards. I had more money than I'd ever imagined. But I was alone. No kids. No husband. My parents were gone. Cancer took my mom. A heart attack took my dad 5 years later. I hadn't spoken to anyone from the old family side in over a decade. The card rattled me. Not because I was afraid, but because they were right in one way. I had destroyed a name. So I decided to finish it completely. There was one last piece of the Brennerman family legacy left standing. A private archive at the California Historical Society in San Francisco. Sealed records, family letters, founding documents, all filed and protected through donations made in the late 1970s. Nobody cared much about them anymore. But I did. I sent in a request under a preservation group I had created 5 years earlier. Claimed that some of the documents were duplicates of materials already digitized by Stanford. Requested they be reviewed for consolidation and storage cost reduction. A month later, I got the clearance. Another month. and half of the sealed archive had been marked redundant and non-unique. That gave me the legal path to buy them out from the archive and relocate them under my foundation's control. I took every file, every map, every family letter. Some I sent to university archives under anonymous donations with no credit attached. The rest, I had shredded. No ceremony, no fire, just an industrial machine that turned their past into confetti. 2 years later, I was invited back to the same gala where it all started. National Children's Literacy Foundation. San Francisco. Same ballroom. New donors. A new generation of leaders. This time, I wasn't a guest speaker. I was the keynote. I walked in wearing a tailored black suit, not a borrowed dress. No one cut me off. No one smiled at me with pity. They stood when I walked to the podium. I stood where Connor once stood. I took a breath, looked out over the same chandelier-lit crowd where I was once laughed at, and I said, years ago someone stood in this room and said, dreamers dream, builders build. They meant it as an insult. But they were wrong. Dreamers do dream. And some of us? We build out of the ashes they leave behind. Silence. Then applause. Real applause. I walked off that stage and never looked back. Connor died alone in a rental condo near the Nevada border. Trent drifted through 2 failed marriages and now teaches overpriced real estate courses on YouTube. Rachel remarried a man twice her age who thinks TikTok is a government spy tool. Their family name? Scrubbed. Forgotten. No awards. No archives. No buildings. Nothing for their grandchildren to inherit except silence. But I didn't walk away untouched. My revenge cost me friends. Relationships. I missed weddings, funerals, chances at love. I didn't bend for anyone, not even myself. I got what I wanted, but it came with a weight. Still, when I walk through the main hall of the Visionary Leadership Fund headquarters in Sacramento, and I see the portraits of students who went to college because of something I built, something that rose from the dust of their empire, I feel peace. Not joy. Not triumph. Just peace. Because in the end, I didn't destroy them just to win. I destroyed them so I could build something better. And I did.